Okay, we're going to go over the why emotions are more important than feelings. Look, I've seen over 25,000 hours of acting classes, and I'll tell you, this is the biggest thing that actors make um, the journey of having to figure out what is the difference between your emotion and your feeling is what's going to be able to bring out your talent in both music and acting. So uh, your um, your ability to be able to access beyond a feeling is going to be able to do incredible things to your work in every single artistic field, art, science, everything. So ingenuity, everything, because you've got it's a whole different thing. So let's go through. I've got interview questions here. Now, first question is, how do you define emotions and feelings, and are they different? Yes, of course, emotions are different than feelings, but it's not an obvious thing to understand because initially, the same word to describe a feeling might be the same word to describe an emotion, but they're different. These things are completely, absolutely different. The depth level is different. I have a emotions triangle. Emotions triangle starts with the feelings on top, and then you go into the deep emotions in the bottom of the triangle. Actually, it starts with ideas on the top, which then flirt with the feelings. But the emotions triangle is this incredible thing because once you start to understand where the depth level is that you're actually accessing, then all your emotional preparations, your emotional activations, everything happening with your art, the ability for you to access your emotion is going to be something that once you activate that emotion, you're not it's you'll start to interact with the emotion, and the emotion won't dissipate. Like a feeling might you might be able to very clearly on your own get the feeling. The feeling is activated. That's great. The feeling's there. You have it when you're in your own, bubble of emotional bubble, however you want to describe getting your emotions going. But then once you start to interact, the feeling will dissipate because the feeling isn't deep enough. When you work with an emotion, you work with an emotion on a way that's going to be able to activate in a more visceral way. You're literally going to be feeling this. I mean, if you work with your emotion to certain levels or certain types of emotion, you'll be feeling them in the bottom of your toes. I mean, everywhere in your body, there'll be a visceral feeling. And then when you actually work to receive the other actor or the other artist, whether you're on uh, music stage or a film set stage, you're literally going to be in a situation where you're going to resonate by receiving them. And then this is what we actually want to do as actors and artists and musicians. We want to actually be able to merge what we activate ourselves and our emotions with what we receive from the other person. This is what I call a dynamics. You have dynamics of the whole thing. So yes, hopefully that answers. How do you define emotions? How do I define feelings? Emotions are going to be deeper. Feelings are going to be personal to you. They're still real. The feelings are still active. Often a feeling, and by receiving a feeling, a feeling is a little bit not as known to you. An emotion would be something that is more known to you. Once you hit the emotion, it's like, oh yeah, now you know that thing, that lump in your throat, or that feeling in your stomach, or emotion can activate all sorts of different things, which is incredible. A feeling is going to be a little bit less. Let's go on to the next question. Why emotions are to be considered more important than a feeling? Now, emotions and feelings work together. You want to be able to stay open with your spontaneity, with your ability to be able to receive another. So you stay open to both your feelings. Your feelings are receptors, and your emotions are more important because once you hit them, as soon as you start to deny your emotions, you start to deny your art. You start to deny your music, your acting, your authenticity starts to get denied once you start to deny your emotion. So you want to work to the level where you have your open feelings happening, where you have your sensors of feeling that are consistently receiving, But then you also want to be at a situation where the depth of your emotion is able to be activated. So yes, emotions are more important than feelings, but this is not to say that feelings are not important. Of course, feelings are going to be important because they connect to emotion. Next question, 3. Can you provide an example of where emotions guided you more effectively than feeling? Okay, yes. Now, if you're working on a song or a scene, let's just say that they're both very, very similar. You're working to activate within yourself the range of emotional range for your art. You want to be able to activate sadness, loss, care, grief, happiness, elatedness, all whatever emotion is. You're going to get into that frequency or the resonation of that to activate that within yourself. Once you have that activated within yourself and you start to do the interaction, the depth of the emotion is going to stay during the interaction. This is incredible. Now, you've got to be able to know this as any kind of artist. It doesn't matter if you're actor or singer or dancer. You want to be able to understand that once your emotions get hit and you hit the emotional level within your own emotional preparation and the way that you activate your emotion, is that you're then going to be able to bring in the desired emotional color of which the art is asking you. So, it could be dancing, music, anything. How do you, next question is, how do emotions influence decision-making processes compared to feelings? Now, I love this question. Emotional influence is an actual thing. Yes, it is. To be emotionally influenced is what we're wanting to be able to have an ebb and flow with a connection to the other person as an artist, singer, dancer. We want to be able, or our audience, we want to be able to have this emotional influence where we're able to be ourselves influenced by our surrounding as well as the other actor, dancer, singer. So when you're making, so this affects the decision-making process, because in the decision-making process, what we're actually doing as artists and as actors is we're literally letting go of our logic on our decision-making processes. And because we've tapped into our instincts and depth, now we actually have our emotions activated. The emotions being activated take over our decision process. Now, this is incredible. Now, this also applies to writers. I don't sit and write, usually without doing at least some of this work, and often it's quite a bit. But I would sit down and make sure that I'm writing out of my emotional influence. When I'm working as an actor, I'm working to be able to be within the emotional range that's desired, and then we're working with the emotional influence. I'm not working under a logical decision process, which changes this whole thing where now audiences have an ability to trust ourselves as artists and creatives, because we have the ability to be able to continuously give that connection is going to be incredibly stronger. It's going to be way stronger with that. Okay, question 5. In what ways can feelings be misleading in assessing a situation? Okay, now feelings are misleading. Now, feelings are misleading, and it's often the trigger of blame between arguments, both in life and art. Now, feelings are misleading because a feeling I often refer to as a fleeting feeling, or the feeling that is not actually actuated into an emotion. And so what we do as a human error that we make ourselves is we assume that the feeling is an emotion, or we assume that something that is not yet factual within us, which is emotion is more factual because it's become visceral. Then all of a sudden we get into a situation where we trip in our communication with others. Now, that means that knowing that we can actually do that intentionally for films, or creative work. Now, not knowing that means that we're going to be in a situation where we're misleading ourselves and making assumptions within a situation. So instead of making assumptions within the situations, we want to be able to allow ourselves to work at the levels where there's more what I call self-evident. You want to be able to have the work become more self-evident. All right, how to prioritize. Number 6, how do you prioritize emotions over feelings in your personal and professional life? That's a good question. How do you prioritize emotions over feelings and your personal and professional? So there's like 3 parts to this question. I prioritize emotions. First of all, you have to be able to make sure that you're in a safe enough environment to be able to experience your emotions, because if you're feeling something authentically and you're not in a safe environment, you're not going to be able to fully encapsulate the artistic creative effort that you're making. So you want to be able to know that. The safety of having a safe place to work is a part of the creative process, which is important. Now, when you're working with the tingulinations, or you're going to feel the tangibility of a feeling, and the feeling is going to be a tangible thing that you're going to have. Now, if you marry the tangibility, or like say, for instance, if you marry an infatuation or a thought process, then you're never going to be able to actually get to the depth of the emotion. The emotion is not going to be able to be activated. Now, this is exactly answering the question, because you want to be able to learn the ability and the gift of being able to prioritize yourself within your own being, to be able to not prioritize being dedicated to a feeling or the thought process that you have, and instead actually realize that there's a deeper instinct, or there's a deeper thing that's literally some sort of emotional intellect. And when you do that, that would be both for how I would do that professionally as well as personally. So it's incredibly important. It's a really good question. There's a lot more I could say about it, but let's get to the next one. What role do emotions play in setting personal boundaries? Yes. So a personal boundary is going to be almost in a self-evident way. It's going to become very clear that the emotion has been activated in a person. And at that point, the body's defense mechanisms, in a healthy way, literally will have this reaction and protection, and create a personal boundary. Now, if you're around people that know how to work with boundaries intact, which many people do, that will allow a happening to occur within the circumstances of your acting or on music set, because there'll be a new moment that both of you will be able to experience, because you've been able to take that in within your own realities together. And those are some magical moments in acting, magical moments in theater and film and music. It's incredibly important to be able to learn what your dysfunctional expressions are, and then your functional expressions are. So that's incredibly important. Your personal boundaries are not defending an idea or a belief. Now, you might have a feeling or a belief about yourself, and you may realize that in order to be able to do the ability with emotion, or do an acting role with emotion, you're going to have to, submit over the fact that your belief system might not be as grand as the grandness of the experience that you're going to go into. Now, when you're able to do that, you're going to experience human growth, personal growth, in ways that will be transformative. And that's the kind of acting roles that, by the way, I want, which is not anybody to do with anyone else. That's because that's what you're able to do. You want to be able to put yourself into the imaginary conditions in an acting scene where you're going to be able to spark the real-time experience of personal growth. And that's why that's very, very interconnected to personal boundaries. Question number 8. How Can understanding emotions improve interpersonal relationships? Okay, big question. Interpersonal relationships are the ability to be able to stay connected to another individual and or in acting and music circumstance. Or could be even for music, you're staying connected to the ambiance of the music itself. There's a connection that musicians will talk about having when they're actually in the moment or um, in an engulfed situation where they're personally artistically involved. So interpersonal relationships will not be able to develop unless both people actually have um, uh, personal boundaries. And when there's a healthy personal boundary in both actors, say for instance in an acting scene or music, and when you're singing a duet, both will be able to experience themselves as well as the other person in real time. And audiences love that. It's special moments to be able to do. Now, you want to be able to understand that understanding emotions, they're how to understand emotions and how they improve interpersonal relationships would be more directly is that when you understand that when you're in a healthy creative environment, you're going to be able to experience emotional triggers. And part of that is part of being in the, usually it's a somewhat difficult or um, uh, somewhat difficult circumstance for acting, of how acting is, you're in a difficult circumstance. Your interpersonal relationship is going to affect the emotions. Once the emotions are affected, then your difficulty is then to make sure that you stay connected interpersonally, both to yourself and as well as to the other actor. So the emotions are, in this case, I would answer this question with understanding that their emotional triggers are part of the whole construct of understanding the precepts of that question. That question is very, very, very deep. Okay, number 9. How emotions can be controlled more easily than feelings. Why or why not? Now, this is an interesting question because some people are able to control their emotions very quickly, or other times with other emotions, they're not able to control their emotions at all. Each one of us, in order to be able to, look, I have 800 emotions in 3 books called Emotional Preparation. Now, there'll be some emotions that I'll work on. I know I need to work harder on because I know that when I work with them, I kind of skid a little bit. The emotions aren't as fluid as other emotions. I'm able to be fully activated myself and then still be able to receive another or receive a given circumstance or a imaginary circumstance, whatever you want to call it. So you're in a situation where these like these these things are, you want to look at the ability, you know when you're relaxed, you're usually in more control than when you're uptight, and that's another element of it. So can emotions be controlled more easily than feelings? It's a good question, because I don't think feelings can get very controlled, because feelings are going to be fleeting. Feelings are the flirtation of, say, the flirtation of anything, um, flirtation of love. That's not the actual emotion of love. The 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 flittering feeling of flirtation is going to be applicable to anger, anything, any kind of emotion, regret, despair. Um, it's the difference between somebody going when they're in regret and being able to go to the bar and have 1, 2 drinks, or being able to go and only hit 15 or 20. So the ability for the people to be able to know that, the feeling is going to be something that's an inclination. The emotion is going to be something that is going to be deeper. Now, other things like, for instance, grief is an example. Man, grief is an example, because when you hit grief, some people express themselves in one way or another. So I would say that, although feelings are lighter, the flirtation of feelings, the fleetingness of feelings are not going to be able to be controlled as much as a well versed, understood concrete emotion. And when the concrete emotion is solid in you, then you're able to at least control your emotional range, and within those connected emotions of that emotional range. So let's say you're doing a part on despair. You're in despair because you've that's the scene that you're working on, or that's the music video that you're working on, and you're able to hit that despair, and you're able to stay within that frequency in the range of despair. That's going to be easier to do than trying to find and work with a feeling level, because a feeling level is going to be something that's going to come and go. It's going to be more flirtatious. It's going to be, which is fantastic. That's all good in their own ways. But the thing is, it's not going to be able to really give the emotional color quite as deeply. Okay, number 10. How do cultural differences impact the perception of emotions versus feelings? Cultural differences are one of the most misunderstood things, and in some areas they're very well understood. It just depends on which area. Some cultural things are going to be more understood than other cultural things. And the more we're able to adapt to cultural differences, the more versatile we're going to be able to achieve how to be able to tell the difference between what's an emotion and what's a feeling. A feeling, there's going to be, and the easiest way to be able to look at that would be by just studying differences between one culture and another culture, and try and be accepting of the culture and go, well, this is where the emotion has depth to it, and this is where the feeling is in the culture. But there's it's more, you know it's significant, but it's still not as deep. And look at that way. Number 11. What is the relationship between emotions and mental health? Good question. Look, mental health and emotions are, there's a connection, and there's also a connection to that and imagination. Now, once the ability to be able to activate the emotion, I teach clearly that you've got to be able to do releasing of the emotion in order to be effective as an actor. I want to be able to not only be able to self activate my own emotion within the emotional range that I'm looking to do, I want to also be able to find that depth and be able to have the experience. When I go out after acting, when I go out after rehearsing, practicing acting, I work on the process of being able to release the new activations that have happened during my acting work and my actual personal activation. My self activation is going to be released as well. Now, this ties to mental health, because the mental health is, you have a logic, and then you also have an emotional logic. When you're working creatively, you want to be able to find the ability to work with your creative logic. You want to be able to find your emotional logic. This is why it's important to know the difference between feelings and emotions. If you're just working with the feeling, and you know that you've got some feeling hit you, that's great. But you want to then see, people chase down the spontaneity of improvisations and all this other stuff, where they chase down the feeling, but they never get the emotion. It would be like dating your entire life and never actually getting married. It's cool. I mean, that's great, and people want to do that, and some that is perfect for some people. But it's not going to have the same results as getting into the other depth. Now, you might there's some people that might have fantastic deep relationships with the way they're doing things without marriage, and that's fantastic. But it's still a fair example. Okay, 12. How do emotions drive motivation and productivity? There is a very big difference between um, emotional drive and the ability to find the motivation within yourself. When you find the motivation within yourself, you're going to be tapping into your emotions. When you find the motivation from somebody else, you might be tapping into fear. Fear, although it's an emotion, most people have never get to the depth of that. Most people don't get to the depth of their fear. I remember working with somebody. I wanted to be able to work on something where they could work on the depth of their fear so they could tell the difference between the emotion of fear and the feeling of fear. And that was the purpose of that thing. One of these particular things I was working on. The feeling of fear would be the feeling of obligation. The feeling of fear would be feeling like you're disappointed in another. Those are feelings. When you get into the depth of emotion, then you're dealing with your own internal processes. You're looking at the ability of, are you disappointed, or are you finding your own fear, and then you can figure out ways to be able to overcome that. Now, if you're looking at protagonist style music videos or storylines for films, you're going to be looking at the ability to be able to really capture the your own fear, for instance, and then get the journey of how to be able to work that fear into the storyline and be able to work through your fear actually in real time, so the audiences can actually see that progression, and that will change your career. That will, I mean, obviously there's the business side of everything, but that will change you as an actor. You'll start to develop yourself as an artist that way, rather than just thinking that fear is the oppression of yourself under a condition or circumstance, which obviously that deals with your productivity. All right. 13. In what ways can emotions be more reliable than feelings in conflict resolution? Yeah. So feelings are going to keep coming back with the same result. And feelings um, might have more variances. So when in conflict resolution, you don't want to deal with just the flittering feeling. You want to deal with what it is at your core emotion. Once you're able to get your core emotions dealt with and you're able to actually figure that out for yourself, then you're going to be in a situation where you've got something working for yourself in a way that's going to be able to create real solutions, because now you're really involved in it. Now, this is also this exact question. I'm going to repeat this question. Now, to repeat it, it's, in what ways can emotions be more reliable than feelings in conflict resolution? This is essentially the same question as what is authenticity. That's exactly the truth. It's whether or not you're going to be really finding your own authentic answers within your emotions, which are within yourself, or whether you're going to be falling for the distractions of feelings. The feelings will often lead you to your emotions, but you've got to make sure that you're in your emotions for them to be actually working and activated. What I just said was really, really darn important. Very, very important. All right. 14. How do emotions affect communications compared with a comparison to feelings? It's a good question. Emotions affect communications because those are when things don't have to be said. Or, look, you're in love with somebody because when you're with them, something will be more than just what is said. You know that there'll be a shared communication of anything. You could be in any kind of situation because there's a unity in what is the emotion, and it's the emotions in the communication, which is different than when a feeling's in the communication. There won't be the solidness of the depth to it. Now, um, there's a lot of different ways to answer this question, because we could break it down into what is communication. Are we communicating for which different things? Are we communicating for art? Are we communicating for I mean, in what field of communication are we speaking? But how do emotions effectively communicate in comparison to feelings is that you're going to have more groundedness, you're going to have more solidness, just like when you bring emotion into your acting exercises or your acting scenes. You're literally going to be bringing the emotion in a solid way where it does not deny the other person what their feelings are or their emotions are, but you're going to be receiving the difference between your feelings and the other person's feelings, and that's incredibly important. Okay, last question for this one. We'll wrap up after this. How can emotions be harnessed for leadership and team management? Look, if you're trying to do team leadership, management, all this other nonsense with a whole bunch of stuff to try and get everyone hyped up and excited and everything, I hope that you're doing it at emotions level. Because if you're just working with the idea that everybody has to have some um, pizzazz of some sort, that's great. It's I don't know, is pizzazz a word? I don't know. But the team management, the real team management, is when you find the authentic depth of feeling in the other person. So you're working as a team to be able to develop at the emotional level your team's motivation. Look, if you do a scene and you're doing a scene that's supposed to be really exciting, action thriller or whatever it is, and you got an action thriller and you've got everybody hyped up, excited, and you got great choreography, great, wonderful, wonderful. But when you go out and you film it and you're going to have a product that's fantastic, when you break down each person's part and you start to find the motivation of the emotion in every single one of those actors, you're going to have a much easier movie to watch, and people will actually be excited when you got all this incredible hard work going into the choreography for, or the martial arts or whatever you got going on. So that's the difference, because they're looking to be able to see the contrast of the emotion, the contrast of the feelings. The feelings are still going to be in the picture, but yet the depth of emotion is going to be the contrast between the different characters in the film, or whatever you want to call the actors. Is very important. All right, I said one more. Let's do one more. What techniques do you use to better understand your emotions and your feelings? Okay, the techniques I use my books, Emotional Preparation, 3 books, 800 emotions. I use emotional preparation, hundreds of different emotions, references to scenes, references to what the emotions actually mean. Then I work on how to be able to get and find those emotions personally within myself. Once I get those emotions personally activated with myself, then I know how to be able to work with them. I also work to be able on techniques to be able to release the emotions once I've had the emotions. So if I feel a tremendous amount of guilt or shame, regret, or I don't know, anything, and let's say it's an incredible amount of love or affection, even the feelings of elatedness, I'm going to still be able to work. I'm not going to stay trying to hold on to that for the next 2 or 3, 4 weeks after filming. That same day, I'm going to work with that, and I'm going to get rid of that emotion out of myself, because I know for an absolute fact that once you clear out those emotions, once you clear those emotions out, once you invite and get those emotions activated in yourself again, when I say invite, when I self activate my own emotion again, I want to be able to practice being able to pull my emotion up, have it self activated, and put my emotion away. So the emotions there, it's with me. It's part of me. It's part of my own authenticity. But I want to be able to do this in a way that's going to be able to resonate with the ability to be able to receive other than myself. And that essentially is part of the definition, in my opinion, of what resonation even is: the ability to be able to resonate would be the ability to be able to receive something other than yourself, even though you've gotten your ability to self-activate that emotion. You've got your emotion activated, but then you've got the ability to also receive, and you've got this resonance, or this resonance of resoundingness, of which your work will then operate from and be able to achieve things. All right, I'm going to take a break, and we'll come back and do more questions. Thanks.